Man of the house. He began to take advantage of me. Late at night, he would come to my room. He forced himself on me, and I felt powerless to stop him. I cried and begged him to stop, but he didn't care. One day, when his wife returned from a trip, I tried to tell her what was happening. With tears in my eyes, I said, "Madam Alice, Chief Anikulapo is hurting me. Please help me." She looked at me coldly and said, "That is part of your service. We paid Auntie Bimpe for you, so we can do whatever we want." Her words cut through me like a knife. I felt so alone, so trapped. I realized there was no one to help me, no one to protect me. Those 6 months were the darkest of my life. Every night, I endured the pain and humiliation. During the day, I worked tirelessly, trying to push away the memories of the night. I felt like a prisoner in that big house, with no way to escape. I thought about my family and the happy days in the village. I missed my father's laughter, my mother's warmth, and my sister's friendship. I wished I could go back to those days, to the time before the fire, before Auntie Bimpe's broken promises. But there was no going back. I was stuck in a nightmare, and each day felt like an eternity. My heart ached with the weight of my sadness and fear. I wondered if I would ever find a way out, if I would ever be free from this terrible life. I held on to a small glimmer of hope, a tiny spark deep inside me. I told myself that one day, things would get better. One day, I would find a way to escape. But for now, I had to endure. I had to survive. Even though it felt like my spirit was breaking a little more each day. When my time at Chief Anikulapo's house was up, Auntie Bimpe came to take me back. I felt a flicker of hope, thinking maybe things would change. Maybe she would care about what I had been through. As soon as we got back to her house, I told her everything that had happened, every painful detail, hoping she would understand and help me. But Auntie Bimpe just looked at me and said, "Sorry, Tabitha." Then she moved on, as if my words meant nothing. She had already brought in another girl to take over the chores at Chief Anikulapo's house. My heart sank. I realized that to her, I was just another girl to be used. She sent me to live with the other orphan girls in a small, cramped room. The room was cold and dark, filled with sadness and despair. I had seen the other girls before, but now I was one of them. We were all trapped with no way out. And that's when my life as a prostitute began. Every night, Auntie Bimpe would dress us up in revealing clothes and take us out on the streets. She found men who would pay for our services, and we had no choice but to follow them home. The first time it happened, I felt a deep sense of shame and degradation. I couldn't believe this was my life. I felt so degraded, so worthless, but there was no escape. During the day, we were locked in the house, and at night, we were sent out to work. Auntie Bimpe made sure we couldn't run away. The house was like a prison, and she was the warden. Each night was a nightmare. The men treated us like objects, not caring about our feelings or our pain. I felt my spirit being crushed a little more with each encounter. I tried to hold on to some hope, but it was so hard. I remembered the promises Auntie Bimpe had made. She had promised me a better life, a chance to go to school, to have opportunities. But those promises were all lies. My life was now filled with darkness and despair. I missed my family more than ever. I missed the days when I felt loved and safe. I wished I could go back to those days, but I knew that was impossible. My reality was now this life of misery and pain. Every night, as I walked the streets, I prayed for a way out. I prayed for a miracle. I hoped that someday someone would come and save me. But until then, I had to survive. I had to keep going, even though every part of me wanted to give up. One night, as I stood on the street with the other girls, a man named Dan picked me. He seemed different from the others. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile. As we walked together, he asked me, "Why are you doing this?" For the first time in a long while, I felt safe enough to tell my story. I told him about the fire that took my family, about Auntie Bimpe's broken promises, and about the terrible things I had endured at Chief Anikulapo's house. I told him how Auntie Bimpe had forced me into this life, and how trapped and hopeless I felt. Dan listened carefully, his eyes filled with compassion. "I'm so sorry, Tabitha," he said softly. "No one should have to go through what you've been through." His kindness made me feel a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he would help me. We reached his home, and he invited me inside. Unlike the other men, he didn't rush or make me feel uncomfortable. Instead, he offered me something to eat and drink, and we sat in his living room talking. I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Dan treated me like a human being, not an object. He didn't force himself on me or make me feel scared. We talked for hours, and for the first time in so long, I felt a glimmer of hope. As the night went on, I felt exhausted from the emotions and the long day. Dan noticed and said, "You can rest here. I won't bother you. You're safe." I hesitated at first, but his gentle demeanor reassured me. I lay down on the couch in the living room, feeling safe for the first time in a long while. Dan left me alone and went to his room, closing the door behind him. I fell asleep quickly, comforted by the thought that maybe, just maybe, there was still some kindness left in the world. But little did I know, my night was about to take a dark turn. When I woke up, I realized how wrong I was. The room felt different, darker, and filled with an eerie silence. I rubbed my eyes and saw Dan standing in the corner, dressed in strange clothes, a red wrapper and a white singlet. He held a small calabash in his hand, and his eyes looked cold and menacing. Fear gripped me as I realized Dan wasn't the kind man I thought he was. He was a ritualist, and he had planned to use me for something dark and evil. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to understand what was happening. I jumped up from the couch, desperate to escape. I ran towards the living room door, but as I reached it, I saw Auntie Bimpe standing there. She was dressed just like Dan, with a sinister smile on her face. My blood ran cold. She had set me up, and there was no escape. "Auntie Bimpe, why?" I cried, my voice trembling with fear. She sneered at me and said, "You thought you could escape, Tabitha. You belong to us now." What happened next was something I can hardly bring myself to say. The room was dark, and I was surrounded by 7 men, all dressed in ritualistic clothing. Candles flickered around us, casting eerie shadows on the walls. It felt like a nightmare, but I knew it was real. Dan and Auntie Bimpe began chanting strange words, and the men moved closer to me. I screamed, pleading for them to let me go, but they ignored my cries. I felt a paralyzing fear as they grabbed me and pulled me towards the center of the room. I closed my eyes, trying to block out what was happening, but the sounds and smells were overwhelming. I prayed for a miracle, for someone to save me, but no help came. My body shook with terror, and I felt utterly alone and powerless. The events of that night left scars on my soul that will never heal, because this is just the beginning of what changed my life completely.